Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And today we're talking about a record called The Kick Inside. This is the debut record by Kate Bush. She was 19 years old when it came out, and that is hard to fathom. I mean, popular songwriting is certainly something you can learn to do at a young age. It's not as shocking as being like a classical piano protege, but given how groundbreaking this album was, and you can tell it's groundbreaking just by listening to it, that's the talent that went into it is still amazing. So this is my first time hearing this record. Kate Bush is a name I've occasionally heard over the years. She sang a duet on a Peter Gabriel album I reviewed earlier this year, but I feel like she's much more famous in Britain than she is in North America. She's a name I barely hear, but when I do hear it, I'm like, she's really interesting. She's really good. You have to listen to her. So I finally got my act together, finally got my copy of The Kick Inside from the library. Unfortunately, the library has kind of this boring cover. There's really cool cover art that's also associated with The Kick Inside. Regardless, let's get to talking about these tracks. So the first track is called Moving. And the first thing you notice when you put Kate Bush in the player is that voice. It's very high. Now, I'm not a voice teacher or someone who understands the physics of this, so I don't know whether it's appropriate to call it falsetto, the head voice. I mean, generally, one only thinks of falsetto when men do it because men, or cis men at least, tend to have very low voices. So the falsetto is seen as a sort of unnatural, almost gimmicky thing they do. Famous groups that do falsetto include, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, or the Bee Gees, sometimes the Beach Boys. I recently talked about Earth, Wind, and Fire. But the funny thing is that this falsetto or falsetto-like voice is almost more shocking coming from a cis woman than it would be coming from a cis man. Even though women naturally have higher voices, there's still something otherworldly about hearing Kate Bush sing it. So I put this disc in the player, instantly I hear the song Moving, and this voice just catches your attention. It's kind of haunting. Now, the song itself, Moving, it's a plea for love sang by a kind of weird character, someone who views themselves as another. There's a line about crushing the lily in my soul. Track number 2 is called the Saxophone Song. And what's striking is you listen to this song a long time before you actually hear a saxophone. Kate Bush really makes you work with the buildup, but regardless, it's a really well-built song. It nicely balances good long vocal parts with good long instrumental parts. It conveys that sort of butterflies in your stomach feeling of falling in love. Sometimes feelings are really hard to put in words. So I like that, Kate Bush doesn't go too far into the instrumental, because I'm not a fan of music like Pink Floyd that's disproportionately instrumental, but she has nice long instrumental pauses to just represent the pure emotion of the song before going into her lyrics. Track number 3 is Strange Phenomenon. This one reminded me of David Bowie, both in the subject matter and the vocal range. There's almost a kind of demonic tonality to how she sings. It's a song about wanting to be part of something, but wanting that something to be rebellious and mysterious. So again, kind of like the song Starman on Ziggy Stardust. Track number 4 is called Kite. This is the poppiest thing to this point on the record. Kate Bush's voice is slightly less high than the others. Like with Moving and the saxophone, there's an allusion to pregnancy, which is kind of the running theme on this album, the title, The Kick Inside. But it's a subtle theme because this song is not really about pregnancy. It's some sort of metaphorical impregnation. She sings, Beelzebub is aching in my belly-o. Arguably, it's even a protest against pregnancy, since the rest of the song is a plea for bodily freedom to fly like a kite. Track number 5 is called The Man with the Child in His Eyes. So if we're thinking of this album as being inspired by Ziggy Stardust, this kind of feels like the equivalent of Lady Stardust. So for those familiar with the Ziggy Stardust album, that's a sort of more laid-back one where David Bowie sings this tribute to a trusted member of the opposite sex. And that's kind of what's going on here. The man with the child in his eyes. It's a really loving song to a man on an album about a woman's rebellion. The composition is still a little bit quirky, and I love how expressive the string gets. But yeah, overall, it's more of a calming presence on this really rebellious album. Track number 6 is the big hit. I'd heard of it, but never really taken the time to listen to it before this record. It's called Wuthering Heights, and it's just a masterpiece in high singing. As far as I can tell, it's a literal summary of the novel. I wasn't a big fan of Wuthering Heights when I tried to read it because I think it's a novel where like very little goes on, but because there are a decent amount of chapters and they're very descriptive. For a modern reader like me who's not great at grasping Bronte era language, it was frustrating for me. I couldn't tell if I was catching or missing details, but I guess I have Kate Bush to thank because she does the SparkNotes version of the characters of this relationship between a twisted but ultimately loving man in Heathcliff and his beyond the grave lover, Kathy. One of the things that's interesting here is that The Kick Inside is often cited as a feminist album. But as I noted on The Man with the Child in His Eyes, it doesn't go for like a straightforward attack on patriarchy. In this song, Kathy, or Kate Bush, I don't know if she's identifying with Kathy, sings for her love for the cruel Heathcliff, the Heathcliff with a temper. And so the version of feminism on this album is expressing its sort of quirky individuality. Maybe she is kind of drawn to domineering men, and that's maybe not great for feminism, the movement as a whole, but part of feminism is just expressing that women can be as individualistic and eccentric as men. Track number 7 is called James and the Cold Gun. It's basically a Western song, and I wondered if it was a reference to Smackwater Jack, which was on Carole King's breakthrough album, Tapestry. So one of the reasons I've been talking about gender issues with this album, other than the fact that the title is a reference to pregnancy, is I believe Kate Bush was quoted as saying that she was trying to create this woman's album that was not like the model, and she sort of put down Carole King's Tapestry as the model. And I don't quite get what she's coming at. I think Tapestry is one of the greatest albums of all time, and I can't really pick up on what stereotype it's putting forward. Another theory I saw is that up to this point, women songwriters were seen as primarily confessional, singing directly about their feelings, whereas Kate Bush tends to prioritize putting on a show, exploring weird characters over directly conveying her feelings. So she's like, why can't a woman artist be more like Ziggy Stardust than like Carole King or Joni Mitchell? That said, when she does pay tribute to Carole King with James and the Cold Gun, she's paying tribute to the one Carole King song, Smackwater Jack, that was not confessional, that was telling a story. Track number 8 is called Feel It. I don't know, it struck me as a comparably tame love song, though still a lusty love song with more of an acoustic song, just compared to the musical intensity of everything before it. We continue this theme of love and lust with the next song, Oh to Be in Love. This one feels kind of like Kate Bush crooning, but there's a bit of a campy haunted house feel to it. Track number 10 is called L'amour looks something like you, another love song, but again, bringing in a bit more of a haunted house, vampire love song kind of feel to it, with lines like, you came out of the night wearing a mask in white color. The next track is called Them Heavy People. It wasn't a particular favorite part of mine. The metaphor of, heavy people and a rolling ball, I guess this idea of being domineered by the outside world when you're kind of a weird, eccentric person. But I believe she released this one as a single, so she clearly liked it better. Track number 12 is called Room for Life. Again, this takes us back to the pregnancy theme, and I feel like it's about how women are disregarded and have traditionally been disregarded and are only seen as, people for performing domestic tasks or as vessels for pregnancy. That said, there's a kind of La Bamba style thing going on with the music that makes it a bit more joyful than maybe that message suggests. So maybe there's something happy going on here, or again, maybe she's just sort of being twisted, putting a little bit of the Joker into her protest music. And then finally, we get The Kick Inside. This is based on an old murder ballad, the Song of Lizzie Wan, which is about a woman getting impregnated by her brother, and then her brother's ashamed of this, so he cuts off her head. This song is sung from the perspective of Lizzie Wan, but in this version, she commits suicide rather than the brother killing her. So it's a way of claiming agency, but certainly not the most conventional way. So just going back to what I said at the beginning of this review, The most striking thing about Kate Bush is her voice. And when I third heard it, I thought, wow, this is a perfect combination of something that is at once incredibly quirky, yet anyone hear it, they're not going to just say, that's weird. It's not Yoko Ono's voice because it's objectively a good and amazing voice. She's hitting all these notes on key. And, if you want to see how impressive her voice is, try singing along to Wuthering Heights using your highest screechy voice and just listen to how bad it sounds. Like the fact that she is able to scream but have it sound so melodic to hit every note is just an incredible talent. She has this natural talent for singing, and it combines perfectly with her literary interests and her interests in weird performing art. The one downside I would say to this very high voice is that it makes it really hard to hear the lyrics she's singing, especially if you're not listening on the best of speakers. And I mentioned this to someone the other night, and he said to me, well, yeah, that makes sense, because in order to sing higher, you have to open your mouth really wide, which in turn makes it hard to enunciate. So I think that's the one downside to this voice, but it comes with the advantage of being so unique, creating songs that are unforgettable, and wow, Wuthering Heights, what a song. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von Bee. See you next time.